Welcome, everybody, and thanks for tuning in for our 2021 Cannabis Recap. My name's Brett McMillen, and I'm the Cannabis and Hemp Division Manager for the Perry Johnson Companies. If you're not familiar with the Perry Johnson Companies, we are a globally recognized certification body for numerous manufacturing and food safety standards, and we also have a separate division for cannabis and hemp. We also specialize in doing good manufacturing practice audits, or GMPs, as well as good agricultural practices, USDA organic, and other ISO-based quality certifications. So if you're tuning in with us today, if you're familiar with our company and you're in the cannabis space, chances are if you're a grower, you're going to need good agricultural practices. And if you're a manufacturer, extractor, producer, having good manufacturing practices or a GMP certificate is definitely a strong thing to have for your company. And we'll get into that in a little bit more. What a year 2021 has been. Perry Johnson Registrar's Food Safety, or PJRFSI, we are very thankful to all our clients and friends in the cannabis and hemp space and various ecosystems that's helped drive our growth. 2021 did see a lot of changes and growth in the industry, and especially with COVID, a lot of shows did come back and some new ones started up. We were really excited to present at numerous events this year across the country and help educate about the importance of GMPs and other certification programs in the cannabis and hemp space. In addition, it was great to put faces to names, learn about what's happening in the industry, and just basically getting out there and seeing people face to face. So 2021 did see a lot of growth in different states that were adding cannabis, either in a recreational or medicinal fashion. As you can see on the map here, there's also a lot of states coming on board. And what we saw this year was basically the expansion of multi-state operators, businesses that have already been successful in other states, that have grown their brands, that are teaming up to come into other states at a startup level to either deal with new companies there or to also get their brands out one way or another with other producers. So between the recreational and medical licenses out there and the different states that are growing, we think that coming into 2022, there's going to be a big uptick in these states, as well as the licenses, as well as to see where these big players show up and who they're going to team with in these industries. Also, it's going to be interesting to see what these states require in terms of the safety of their cannabis. What are they going to require for lab testing? What are they going to require for the producers? Are they going to need a GMP certificate? Are they going to be inspected in a way that will keep the citizens of that state safe and keep those products safe for their customers? What we like to do during recaps and also some of our presentations we've done during the years, we kind of like to do a news of the day and go over the various states that we work with and go over some of the sales numbers and things that we're seeing in the industry. So with Michigan being our home state, we always like to talk about how things have trended in Michigan, which has been pretty incredible. So you can see here in July 2019, total sales were roughly 30 million between all different types of products. And as we scan down here to July 2020, total sales increased to almost 52 million a year later. And in July 2021, just this past July, the state of Michigan hit almost 170 million in combined cannabis sales between medical and recreational, which is incredible. To end the year, Michigan was at approximately 168 million for the month of December, which put them on track for almost $1.2 billion in sales for the year 2021 in Michigan, which definitely put Michigan on the map as one of the top states in the nation for cannabis sales and development. Just in comparison, the Michigan cherry market in 2021 and 2020 was roughly about $33 million. So cannabis is quickly becoming a huge commodity, a huge agricultural product, if you will, in many states. Another state we always like to talk about where we have a lot of clients, is Colorado. And as you can see, in July of 2021, state of Colorado sold almost 100 and just over 190 million in cannabis. So that was obviously more than Michigan. To end the year in December 2021, Colorado was actually down a bit to 177 million and right at about 1.9 billion for the year. So interestingly enough, that actually was down from 2020 when they had 2.19 billion. So I think in 2022 we're going to see some things come out of the wash with the market in Colorado and why those numbers were changing. If it had to do with COVID, if it has to do with the black market, if it has to do with customers knowing what they want and what types of products they're buying. So we'll keep our eyes on the state of Colorado coming into 2022 for other presentations that we do and how we keep our eyes on things. So also, as you can see from our slide here, which was give credit to our friends over at MJ Biz Daily, a lot of the more well-established states out west that have markets that have been in place for a while are actually seeing sales go down a bit. They're still making a lot of money. There's still a lot of revenue. There's still a lot of sales. For instance, California was at 403 million for the month in October. You can see Colorado is at 158 million in August. I don't think that includes medical. So the growth right now seems to be in a lot of the Midwest region and the East Coast where the markets are emerging. Citizens are excited about the fact that marijuana can be purchased legally in dispensaries and so forth. But there's still a huge black market and underground market, if you will, out west that is really affecting what these revenue trends are going to be. Another state that we were keeping track of, an emerging market, a smaller state, but still interesting to watch, is the state of Maine, which is typically known for its lobster. In its very first month this year, sold almost 1.5 million. And then things peaked in August at 9.5 million, and also right about the same numbers for December 2021. So the first year for Maine, total 82 million in sales for the state of Maine versus the other states we just talked about. Michigan at 1.2 billion, Colorado at 1.9 billion. California final numbers aren't out yet, but that could be closer to 3 billion. And also, to turn the page here to this picture you see of the lobster in the tank. This is kind of an anecdotal situation we brought up at a couple presentations this year, and it's been very popular. I can't make this up, folks. A lobster was infused with THC before being put in the boiling pot to lower the anxiety level and make it a happier lobster or a high lobster before it got turned into dinner and had some butter put on it. So I'll just read the highlight here. Biology researchers exposed lobsters to THC, a chemical in cannabis that gets users high, after a lobster shack owner claimed the drug could ease the crustacean's suffering when getting cooked. So that wraps up kind of keeping an eye on the different states here and recapping what we've seen in 2021 on a state-by-state level. Personally, I think that 2022 is going to see a lot of growth on the East Coast and Midwest markets with new states coming on board, new licenses being given out, and the overall expansion of the industry. There's nothing to look at that wouldn't have us all think that the market is going to continue to expand. So the Perry Johnson companies obviously deal with a lot of safety and manufacturing scenarios and certifications, and specific to cannabis and hemp, we've seen a big increase in the amount of clients and folks in the cannabis and hemp space going for GMP or good manufacturing practices certification. Why is that? Well, as you can see on this slide here, it kind of still is the Wild West, although it's not getting as wild. Different states have different regulations. Some states don't even require any type of an audit or a certification. Some states do these visits on their own. Other states will require a third-party GMP audit. For instance, the state of New York, which we're recognized by for hemp GMP audits. And so a cannabis company may have a lot of experience in growing and what they're doing, but they might not have a lot of experience in the actual part of documenting what they do and knowing that they're meeting the requirements of a good GMP program. Because what happens when you don't have GMPs in place? What can happen that can affect your company or the company you're investing in not gaining that share of revenue that we just talked about in all the previous states that are growing so much? Well, as you can see here, and this is all freely available on the internet, recalls. Recalls, recalls, recalls. Are you testing your product correctly? Are you making your product correctly? These different items, these different scenarios that you're going through here can greatly affect your brand, greatly affect what's on the shelf, and greatly affect the bottom line of your company. So one of the biggest things we've seen this year in 2021 is companies taking the concept of GMP and the concept of a mock recall seriously, because some states require it. And what would you do if your company had a recall? Would you be able to stop the bleeding? Would you be able to get on social media and protect your brand? Would you be able to understand where that recall came from? What batch was it? Things of that nature. So what can cause a recall? What can get your company in trouble? Even if you're a testing lab or a producer, a lot of recalls come back because of something scientifically wrong with the product. It could be pathogens, pesticides, heavy metals, yeast and molds, things of that nature that if a state comes in and does a secondary test or another lab does a secondary test, that may institute a recall. Or somebody could have gotten sick from your product, which then can institute a recall. These are all things that can be covered and dealt with through a good GMP program, which is based on the tenets of good food safety. So we've been talking a lot about GMPs, mock recalls, ways to protect your brand, ways to protect your customers, even more importantly. Where does GMP come from? Where did all of this start? Well, most people would agree that the basic tenets of GMP were founded in what's called the Code of Federal Regulations, or CFR. And Section 110 of the Code of Federal Regulations is really the basis of most GMP programs, and it is the baseline for most food programs, cannabis programs, and hemp programs, either in the private industry to get into big box stores or for a particular state. You'll also hear of the Code of Federal Regulations relative to other programs that don't really fit into what we're discussing today, but the CFR acronym and all those different numbers are definitely going to keep coming up within the cannabis and hemp space. And really, there's really about 4 CFR programs to keep your eye on as your company grows, or if you're working for a company that needs to get certified. It's basically CFR 110 and CFR 117. And then for dietary supplements, that's called CFR 111. And when you get into the pharmaceutical levels, that's called CFR 210 and 211. So in addition to the CFR programs being the basis of a lot of GMP checklists out there, what's great about the Perry Johnson companies is that we actually have an industry accredited GMP checklist for cannabis and hemp. This year in 2021, we saw a big increase of cannabis companies actually getting GMP certified versus hemp companies getting GMP certified. So that's great to see. And as you can see here on the slide, in addition to meeting all these regulations, thinking about mock recalls and brand awareness, and more importantly is your product safety within GMP. So who is testing your product? How do you know it's clean? How do you know it's going out the door? And these are things to think about when you interview a testing lab. Is the lab accredited to a particular program called ISO 17025? How often does the testing have to get done? And what are you getting tested for? Do you even know what you need to be tested for? Do you know what you want to add to your certificate of analysis? Things like heavy metals, pesticides, potency, terpenes, pathogens. These are all critical items that any product should be tested to before it goes out the door. Also, we've talked about this a lot in previous presentations and discussions, and it also has come up a lot with a lot of our hemp clients is the concept of packaging. Obviously, in the cannabis space, big thing we've all seen over the last few years is what's happening with the edibles. You just simply can't sell edibles that look like children's candy or could be confused for children's candy. We've seen a lot of recalls because of that. Not that anything was wrong with the product, it was more how it was packaged. And there are some pretty scary stories out there of kids getting their hands on edibles or gummies thinking that it's a safe candy or something like that to eat. So definitely have to keep your eye on the packaging and know that you're meeting the state requirements, including how it's weighted, the shape, the color. Does it have child resistant packaging? Things of that nature. So, how do we get GMP certified in 2022? We are proud to announce that Perry Johnson has released its new 2.0 version of our cannabis safety standards. This includes GMP certification for hemp and for cannabis, as well as good agricultural practices, or what's called GACP, good agriculture and collection practices for marijuana growers. Speaking of, in the state of Michigan, if you are selling clones to a dispensary or to other growers, you must get a GACP certification. Perry Johnson Registrar's Food Safety, PJRFSI, we are an industry leader in third-party certifications for these types of industries. And so we are recognized by various states and various clients and entities to come in as a private third party, review our checklist, provide an experienced auditor, and at the end of that day or multiple days, you will receive a report as to what any corrective actions were from that audit. Once you respond to those corrective actions, they're marked as being acceptable and your certificate is issued to you. That process is an annual recertification for most programs that we offer. So what exactly is our new version, our new 2.0 version all about? Basically, we updated the checklist. We added more current best practices, and we're really proud of it. We're really excited to have it out there. If anybody listening right now wants to download a copy of these checklists, they are available on our website at PJRFSI.com. But really, what are the points of GMP? What's the philosophy of it? As you can see here on the slide, there's 5 P's of GMP: your people, your premises, your processes, products, and procedures. If you follow all 5 of these, there's another big P word out there that's not included that it will help, and that's called profit. Because chances are you may not have a recall or you may not have a situation that can affect the value of your brand. This program can also be put in conjunction with USDA Organic for hemp products and also the good agricultural practices portion. This other line here about insurance and security and water bottles and the zoo just brings up some stories from 2021 and some things that we've seen in the industry here. Insurance. We had a lot of, we actually had about 3 or 4 large insurance carriers reach out to us about insuring companies that have a GMP certificate because they're trying to lower their risk factor. So the insurance companies are starting to understand what to look for. And if you are certified by Perry Johnson, there are insurance companies out there that will offer a discount of some extent on your insurance because of this. So we worked pretty hard for that. Security. I was at a grow facility this year in Michigan, which I won't mention, and In terms of security relative to insurance and the types of claims that they were having in the industry, um, one of the more consistent claims they had were laboratories being broken into, and the $1 million equipment wasn't being stolen, but the bad guys didn't realize that labs don't really carry or hold that big of a gold mine of product. It's a lot of samples. So it was kind of funny in a way, but a lot of labs got broken into. The other thing that was a big claim was actually security within the building itself from its employees. And with the grower in Michigan, in their grow room, in their trimming room, folks were bringing in, their employees were bringing in empty water bottles, like a Yeti bottle with a lid on it. And during the day, they figured out where the blind spots were in the security cameras, and they were actually filling their Yeti bottles with bud and leaving every day with basically a tip to themselves. So if you can imagine 12 people trimming, leaving every day with a Yeti bottle filled with bud, that's a pretty exorbitant amount of theft and an exorbitant amount of loss of product. So knowing your security, knowing your blind spots, and being able to understand what your employees are doing and not doing can definitely save you on claims during your insurance. You'll see the zoo. Another story, I brought this up in multiple presentations. It's always a classic. Again, this is something I can't make up. Is I was at a grow operation in Colorado Springs, and in one of the bud rooms, I walked in while getting the tour, and it didn't smell like bud. It smelled like a zoo, quite frankly. And I looked down at the ground, and there were little brown chunks and little chunks of carrot. And I looked up at the gentleman who was giving me a tour, and I said, "What's going on?" And he pointed in the corner, and there was a huge old tortoise. And he said, "Oh, that's Jose, our security tortoise." So there was actually a tortoise living and walking around in the grow room, just pooping on the floor and eating carrots. And I asked the guy, I said, "What are you doing about keeping this sanitary?" "Oh yeah, we mop every day, we clean it up." So those are the kind of things that are out there in the industry that we see in the trenches sometimes. And I can't even make this up. Uh, Another thing that we saw in the trenches that a lot of companies were doing, although it's not necessarily required, is what's called an EMP plan, or environmental monitoring plan. If you're listening into this and you're in the industry, or you're a grower or a producer or maybe a consultant, having an environmental monitoring plan can be very important to know that you're starting with a clean slate. Have you done swabs for Listeria, E. coli, Salmonella? Do you know how clean your grow room is? Do you know how clean the stainless steel is when you're manufacturing edibles or vape cartridges or doing the actual extraction itself? So all these things over the years and through our experiences with this GMP program, we bring those back to the table. We bring them back into our checklist, and we try to help our clients be successful and understand what we've seen out there and bring those experiences back to you. So we've talked about the tenets of GMP, how important all these things are. Here's a couple excerpts from our standard. For instance, section 3, dealing with worker health and hygiene. Do you have signs up that say wash your hands? How do you handle somebody that's sick coming into the facility, or somebody at the facility that gets sick? Where do you have your signage up, right? Do you have a sanitation schedule in place? Things of this nature. A lot of companies know about this and do this, but they don't have it in writing or don't have a program in place. Here's another excerpt. This is more of the indoor cultivation end, or the good agricultural practices. I can't tell you how many grow operations I've been in that I've almost tripped over hoses or standing water on the floor, things of that nature. Are your floor drains open and clean? Do they work? When's the last time you swapped out filters on your HVAC? How do you handle your HVAC? Also, things like pest control. Do you have pest traps every so many feet? Do you have them near garage doors? Do you have them outside your facility? You may check them, but do you use a third party, or do you have somebody internally do these things for you so that you can check and know that they've been taken care of on a consistent level? And finally, how do you know that you're ready for an audit? How do you even start the process? Most important thing is to know the checklist that you're going to be certified to, like our 2.0 GMP program. Read the checklist. We will give that to you gladly before your audit. And so that's what's called a pre-assessment. Review this ahead of time with your team. Know the requirements of the checklist. And then talk to your employees. Train them on what you're doing. A good GMP program starts from the ground up, from just the basic labor all the way up to the president. Everybody's got to be on board. Do the internal audit like we mentioned. And then from the internal audit, whatever those corrective actions are, whatever those shortcomings are, be honest with yourself and put some corrective actions in place. Once you've done those things, you're ready for an audit. And the other thing to remember with the audit process is it's not so much as a pass fail as much as what are those corrective actions and how systemic are they, right? How prepared are you for the audit and how is your system in place? So just to recap on, we talked about how to be ready for an audit. This slide shows more of the process, the chronology of getting your certificate and maintaining that into the future. Obviously, when you're going for a GMP certification, you want to deal with a company that is an accredited certification body that has experience in the industry like Perry Johnson. You're going to want to be realistic with yourself about your schedule. When do you really think you're going to be ready? Plan ahead, get your team on board, and set a goal that will help keep you on track to get these things done. You'll work with our scheduling department, and if you so choose, we can come out and do a pre-audit. Unless you have a consultant or you're doing that internally yourself. Once the pre-audit's done, you'll actually have the official audit done, where the auditor will review your documentation as well as what's going on in your facility, and they'll be using our GMP 2.0 checklist. Once that audit's done, you'll receive a report of any corrective actions that need to be done. We're all human, there may be a few. You respond to those in writing. We review those and mark those as being acceptable. And once that whole process is done, your certificate is issued to you. Typically, that's good for 1 year. So this is an annual recertification process. And again, let's just recap the importance of being certified. What can that do for your company? It's going to lower risk to the public for health and safety. It's going to keep you ahead of your competition. Be proud of the fact that you have some kind of safety certification in place, whether it's GMP, GAP, HACCP, one of the CFR programs, or maybe it's just your state program. It can also reduce recalls, save money, increase consumer confidence, and also lower your risk of a recall. And like we mentioned before, this is a big leverage tool for discounting your insurance. So in closing, I just wanted to say thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of Perry Johnson's success this year and into the future. And if you'd like any of our programs, if you'd like any of our checklists, you can go to PJRFSI.com to download them, including a new version of all of our 2.0 programs. And if you have any other questions about resources, certification, or any other items in the cannabis and hemp space or the overall food safety world, we'd love to talk to you. And again, my name is Brett McMillen from the Perry Johnson Companies. Let's have a great 2022. Thank you so much.